All right, so without further ado, let's get started here. I'm going to share my screen. So today's webinar, we're going to talk about AI, particularly the role data plays in making AI work for you. I, by way of introduction, my name is Nevin Raj, and I am the co-founder and COO of Grata. And today we brought the best technical talent we have and leadership we have to share with us more about this topic. So I'd like to introduce first Song Choi, who's the CTO of Grata. Song, you want to give the audience a quick 1 minute on your background?
Thanks, Nevin. Hi, I'm Sung. I've recently joined Grata as its CTO. I've been in the tech industry for 25 years, working at places like Grubhub, Warby Parker, and SeatGeek, and I'm just really excited to be a part of this amazing team here at Grata.
Thanks, Sung. And then we also have Pallavi Paul, our SVP of product.
Hi, everyone. Really excited to chat with you guys about AI and M&A. A brief intro, I'm head of product here at Grata. I've led product strategy since Grata's seed stage, which is about 4 years ago. I've been in fintech product development for over 15 years, working at places like Moody's, iPrio, IHS Markit, and Oak North.
Great. Well, thank you both for the introductions. This actually shows the balance we're going to take during this session today. We'll talk a little bit about the what, so what people are doing with LLMs, how they're using AI in their systems, how we use it at Grata, and then a little bit about the how, the behind the scenes on what's actually happening with the technology, how to make this work for you. And to that note, I actually want to start off. We hear a lot about AI and LLMs in the news. I wanted to have Sung start off with an introduction on what is an LLM, how do they work, just so we get a foundational understanding of what's going on behind the scenes and what's behind the buzz of what we hear in the news every day.
Great. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is an LLM? Well, an LLM stands for Large Language Model. At its core, an LLM is essentially like autocomplete on steroids, massively scaled up, smarter and more powerful than your average search bar. Underneath all that cleverness is a sophisticated piece of technology called a transformer. In fact, in GPT, the T stands for transformer. Transformers are huge neural networks with billions of adjustable parameters that learn to spot patterns hidden in mountains of text. Using predictive analytics obtained by training on massive amounts of data, an LLM takes your query and instantly tries to figure out three things. One, your intent. What are you really trying to know? Two, the context. What's the situation or background behind your question? And third, scope. How broad or narrow is your request? But here's the catch. They're only as good as the data sets that they're trained on. Garbage in, garbage predictions out. Quality data in, you get accurate, reliable insights out. In other words, great results begin and end with the quality of the data. Next slide. Now, let's talk about how this is all materializing in the world of tech. Right now, every major tech company is locked in a fierce race to develop the best AI model. They're chasing what is known as AGI, or artificial general intelligence, which essentially means AI that can understand, learn, and apply knowledge across a wide range of tasks and domains, mirroring the cognitive versatility of the human brain. This is an extremely expensive race, and it's mainly because of three factors. First, compute power. These companies are literally buying NVIDIA GPUs and TPUs by the truckload to power the massive computations that AI requires. Second, talent. It's a red hot market out there for software engineers, data scientists, and infrastructure specialists with advanced AI skills. Competition for this talent is extremely fierce and expensive. And then finally, and most crucially, data. High quality, curated data sets aren't just costly to acquire, but also to maintain, store, and protect. And here's the catch. The availability of truly valuable data is quite limited. Publicly available data can only take you so far, creating a real bottleneck for even the most for largest tech firms. This is why specialty data, like detailed private company deal data, is especially valuable. It's rare, proprietary, and carries significant commercial weight. Specialty data unlocks enormous potential within a focused domain known as narrow AI. Unlike AGI, narrow AI is designed specifically around a single defined objective, making it extremely effective at tasks like recommendation engines to predict what you'll want next, or financial analysis tools that can parse complex data to surface critical insights. And that's where commercial AI is today. It thrives on specialized, valuable data solving specific high-impact problems that businesses care deeply about.
Really helpful high level background. I want to actually shift gears a little bit. And now that we know a little bit about what LLMs are and who's actually building these foundational models in I want to shift to how AI and LLMs are actually used in M&A. So Paul V, as the SVP of product at Grata, I know you talk to hundreds of customers, you hear this every day. Can you tell us a little bit more about how deal makers, so private equity firms, investment banks, corporate development teams, are actually using this technology? A little bit about where they're good today.
Absolutely. And so you heard Sung talk a lot about LLMs and make that distinction between commercial LLMs. Um, and as you heard, they're fairly powerful tools. I think of them as our own on-demand analyst, one that can process huge volumes of trusted information and respond based on those precise instructions. And one of their superpowers is summarization. So if you have a lot of content on a market or a company, and an LLM can digest pages and pages of that research and distill it down to something actionable in seconds. So we've seen deal makers use LLMs to draft outreach emails once the right content, positioning, and context are fed in. The model then can personalize that outreach and that response. But there are a few more interesting use cases. So we've heard of firms feeding in years of past data into LLMs to be able to reverse engineer patterns to understand what contributed to premium valuations and maximizing value, as well as what sectors responded best to specific strategies. So that's insight that you typically would have needed an entire team to piece together, a team that's spending a lot of time looking through that data and making sense of it. The other piece is also meeting prep. Again, this leans back to the core value of summarization. So instead of manually combing through uh, transcripts or notes or data within CRMs, deal makers are using LLMs now to highlight key points, surface follow-ups, understand questions that they should ask walking into meetings better informed without hours of prep work.
Paul, what are use cases people are trying that are not working?
Use cases that users are trying that are a little less effective typically focus around the data itself that they're using to generate their insights. And that's kind of what I've alluded through the process of my original response, which is that an LLM is only as good as a trade data that it's trained on or fed. So depth of data, the accuracy of data, and the freshness of data really matters a lot in terms of producing the right, correct, accurate output. And so in M&A, the bar is particularly high because the outputs lead to decisions that then have larger consequences. So there's a couple of ways LLMs can fall short. One is outdated data. That's an important one. So if you're making investment decisions based on information that is as of January 2022, that can be fairly disastrous. And that is when OpenAI's latest data has been trained on. You need data that's refreshed near real time to make those investment decisions. And at Grata, for example, we refresh transaction data on a daily basis, update company profiles monthly for software businesses and quarterly for others, because we understand the pace of change in industries. And to combat the staleness of data, LLMs have launched a live web search feature. But even that has its limitations, partly because there is a limited set of data on the private markets, which leads to my next point around hallucinations. And that's a particularly important when you think of LLMs. So if you're not familiar with the term, hallucination refers to when an LLM generates a response that's factually inaccurate or entirely fabricated. And this is surfaced more often when working with middle market businesses where public web data is often thin. These companies may not have detailed websites, and to get a full picture, you really need supplemental sources to understand the full context of the company. Some of those supplemental sources are data from government filings, data from press releases, proprietary data sets, from third party applications, or direct market research. So, if you are using a live web search feature to power your LLM, you are limited to whatever that single source of data is. And if the model can't find the full context of information that it's looking for on the website, it can then try and fill those gaps through a hallucination, through a fabricated response, because it's incentivized to produce something. So that's, another reason why leveraging LLMs need to be kind of thought of in a careful way, particularly for M&A purposes. Um, and the last piece is that general purpose LLMs are not always purpose built for M&A. So if you think about it, they're really designed to be used for a variety of different purposes. So if you're like me, you might use it for recipe ideas, to generate workout routines, or get vacation planning ideas. But what it also means is that it may not be fine-tuned for the needs of M&A deal makers. So to get something specific, you need to prompt, to guide, and to do a careful review of the output, maybe even iterating a few times to make sure the output is something you feel confident to use in your analysis, or to present to others. So you might want to ask it, give me a competitive landscape on company X, or produce a customer data analysis for a SIM, but the results may be generalized and vague. So you want to make sure that you are custom prompting, and that the tools that you're using are really designed for the M&A use case. Essentially, what I'm highlighting is that the quality of the data is absolutely fundamental. It's the bedrock of how these LLMs deliver meaningful insights, and also ensuring that it's fine-tuned for the M&A use case so you can reasonably rely on the output.
Going off of that point and double clicking into the data, switching gears to Sung. Sung, we know that Grata and with Grata's engineering, a lot of time is put into refining and generating proprietary data. Can you talk to us about some of the challenges that the systems at Grata and really purpose-built systems need to solve to get some of that foundational intelligence that powers LLMs for the M&A use case?
Sure. So as Pallavi mentioned, most standard MLMs are going to simply try to get information from the public domain. And as she mentioned, they're prone to hallucinations because they sometimes make naive assumptions about accuracy. They don't inherently know what is correct or incorrect. They just when they encounter conflicts, they don't really have the knowledge or the subject matter expertise to intelligently reconcile those differences. And even worse, if they happen to crawl a particular site and accept it as truth, then those will ultimately result in inaccurate information that the LLM will confidently display as truth, and that often results in not only hallucinations but really, really incorrect assumptions that can really derail your attempts to try to get to the truth. So again, it goes back to the garbage in, garbage out statement earlier. So where Grata is different is that we rely on exclusive proprietary data that gives us a unique advantage. When we use AI and we train our models, we're not just going off of the public domain. We're using high quality proprietary data sets, and the insights that we produce are far, far more accurate than anything you might get with a standard MLM. Um, it's essentially kind of like our moat, right? It is an unbridgeable barrier that a general AI just cannot cross. Um, and so we build what's known as what we call our foundational intelligence. We don't just rely on the raw data, but we also use our subject matter expertise that we have in-house, and we build proprietary AI models that are specifically trained to recognize the anomalies and reconcile the conflicting data that we see when we crawl the net and or when we use in conjunction with our proprietary data to come up with an opinionated perspective that is true, that we believe is truly correct, and we know is correct because it is based on a rock solid foundation. And what this means in practice is that not only does the intelligence we create comprehensive, it's accurate, it's actionable, and it's tailored specifically to the nuanced needs of business decision makers. We deliver insights that general AI just can't simply achieve on its own.
And so there are a few ones called out here at the bottom. Can you
Mhm.
perhaps share some more detailed examples of where this comes into play? There's a question from the audience saying, hey, like these days it feels like it's not too hard to string together some AI queries and
Mhm.
some simple APIs. Can you talk about some of the challenges in creating this data?
Sure. So let's say you use a general AI search, general AI LLM to ask how many employees does company X have? Well, most likely company that general AI is going to go to LinkedIn, is going to take a look at its employee count and say we have 80 employees. Well, what if a data source like ZoomInfo or other publicly available sources actually this company has 90 employees? How is the LLM going to decide which is more authoritative? It's going to make an educated guess, right? It's going to say, we believe that LinkedIn is more accurate, so therefore we believe in the 80 employee count. But we at Grata know that there are certain nuances and certain proprietary information that we have that's going to either verify the assertion of one of those public sources, or it's going to supersede it because we have the information that simply we know is more accurate given the fact that it's proprietary, and it's going to say definitively, even though LinkedIn says 80 and ZoomInfo says 90, we know that the accurate number is 100. And that gives us the advantage of accuracy that the public LLMs just can't compete. Similarly, with things like anomaly detection and sort of standardization, when you look at how this information gets propagated across the internet, there is no standard that they all follow. They do whatever they feel is best for themselves, nor do they necessarily have any way to validate that on their own. If a company has information that is publicly sourced, it's going to go by it's going to take it as canon and it's going to accept it as truth. Whereas we have the subject matter expertise to be able to look at a data set and go, that doesn't look right. We know based on some other information data set that we have that financial statement or the financial estimate that this site is producing is probably inaccurate. So we're going to supersede that with our more confident data set and say that this is what we believe full-heartedly is how this company should be represented.
So it sounds like it's a lot about not just taking the sources at face value, but using domain expertise to understand which source to use at which time, how to reconcile. Do you pick one? Do you take an average? Do you take a max? Do you take a min?
Mhm.
And using some of that non-public data as well that sits under the hood that may not be across every company, but that may be under a subset to make inferences about the rest. Am I interpreting that right?
Correct. Yes. It is the fact that we have a level of insight that isn't available to the public that makes us make more educated or to make more well-educated assumptions and guesses about where, or even assertions about what a company's actual how a company should be represented. And that gives us the unique competitive advantage that, again, public AIs and public LLMs just can't compete with.
Very helpful. So we talked a little bit about the what. Let's get into more of the how. And what we've heard, and especially around data. So, Pallavi, we've heard from, again, you talked to a lot of customers, and a big topic has been how do I get my data, or which data should I be using from my proprietary set of information to give me a competitive advantage? So tell me more about this private access exclusive data. How are deal makers thinking about this? What are they actually using today?
Great question. I actually think this is one of the most overlooked opportunities in M&A. Deal makers don't often realize how much data they're sitting on, how much proprietary data they're sitting on. So think of all of the documents in a box, a SharePoint, a OneDrive, any other type of document library. Think of the notes and details buried in CRMs, as well as the detailed analyses and red lines that are saved in private deal rooms like DataSite. That's not just clutter. That's institutional information, institutional memory. It reflects your firm's thinking, your firm strategy, risk frameworks, valuation, sector views, years of intelligence captured in context. Now, prior to LLMs, all of that information, it's hard to tap into. You need to know where it's living, it's siloed, it's fragmented. But with LLMs, it really opens up a whole new frontier and opportunity to use that data effectively. So today, with secure private deployment of AI, firms can unlock the potential of the data that they've curated, that as well as the data they have access to, and they can turn that into an internal knowledge base with which enables their firm to learn from each other. So imagine being able to ask, how have we evaluated supply chain risk in the past? What rationale did we use to walk away from X deal? And getting clear, grounded answers based on the data and insights from your own deal history and your own documents. So this gives your firm a shared memory, one that gets smarter as you store more documents, more research, and one that enables you to make smarter decisions, faster decisions, using better context, and also to drive more consistency across the organization. So you're not just relying on one individual that's been at the firm for 15 years. You're able to capture your firm's IP and make that more actionable.
Really helpful. And that's a lot of the kind of internal data that firms are using. How about the proprietary, what they're calling market data or third-party data? Who are they integrating and how are they thinking about this in their tech stack?
Yeah. So we do hear of firms typically using a couple of third-party platforms for their view on the private markets. So if they're going deep on VC and growth deals, they'll typically use PitchBook, CV Insights, or Crunchbase for that data. Um, as they're looking for deeper data on public market equivalents, they'll use FactSet and CapIQ for produced analyst reports. They'll use CapIQ or PitchBook. Um, and certainly for data on private markets, they'll use Grata, as we're certainly the best in class data source for that.
And then speaking of that, tell me a little bit about Grata's proprietary data. Song talked about the foundational intelligence and how Grata is making sense of public information, which is harder than it seems on the surface, even with advancements in AI. What type of information is not public in Grata?
Yeah, so foundational intelligence is the foundational layer. But we like to look at it as two more layers on top of that. so private access and exclusive data. These are insights that are hard to find anywhere else, particularly if you focus on the middle market. So a couple of examples I'll talk about is one is around sizing proxies. Deal makers care about understanding the size and scale of a particular business, particularly as you're making investment decisions. And so, for investors that are consumer facing, they have historically relied on customer review data to make sense of how large the business is, how successful, and how much stickiness that brand has. And so that's something that is incorporated within the Grata experience that you can view directly on company profiles. It's a powerful signal indicating customer engagement and brand footprint, and particularly valuable when financials are not available or when um, LinkedIn presence is not available for understanding scope and size. And similarly to that, we've also incorporated data such as PPP loan data, specifically to better understand size for smaller US-based businesses. There's also something we like to call CRM intelligence. So, as I've mentioned before, there's a lot of rich data that's sitting in internal knowledge bases within CRM. So, these are research notes, past outreach, analyst insights. That lives in one silo that is CRM. And we have enabled deal makers to make use of that rich context while they're earlier on in the deal making process, while they're actively sourcing. So we embed that intel directly into sourcing workflows. That means if you're planning an upcoming conference and looking to surface notes as you prep for that conference so that you can effectively engage with the right folks there, you can use CRM Intel to build out your notes and your perspective on those businesses. Or if you're prioritizing outreach for your pipeline, Grata's uh, and Grata's embedded CRM Intel to help you better understand which companies to focus on, which ones to keep lower in the priority. So with embedding CRM Intel, Grata makes sure that you are not flying blind and that you can surface the real-time context that your firm is storing in CRM directly in your sourcing experience. And the last piece I want to talk about is our exclusive network. It's a community-driven layer where advisors can share deal opportunities to buyers that are within Grata's network. It's a curated, high signal channel that complements an outbound sourcing approach with real time inbound leads. All of these are just some examples of our private access and exclusive data that come together to do one thing, which is help deal makers source smarter, move faster, and make better informed decisions in the private markets.
Very interesting, Pallavi. Building off of that, so we talked a lot about data, that foundational intelligence, the private access, and then exclusive data layers that ultimately lead to a better experience. Tell us more about, as you lead product at Grata, tell us more about what's your vision, where is Grata going next in the Gen AI space over the next coming weeks to months?
Yeah, so I'll actually start with what we have today. We've launched Grata's AI Analyst, and this is our really our foray into embedding Gen AI into our experience. It's designed to answer high context questions on a private business, such as how does a company perform in a recession? Or where does it sit in its value chain? And what's unique about our AI analyst is that it pulls from the vast content of data that we have on private businesses, web content, LinkedIn, press releases, government filings, review data, and more to provide depth and specificity to its answers. So the data, the responses that you're getting are responses based on real context about that particular business. But that is not the end of the line for us as we think of Gen AI and what that means for our platform. And I don't see it as a particular feature, but rather a foundational layer that's embedded across every step of a customer's deal making workflow. So, a couple of ways we're thinking of integrating Gen AI into the customer experience. I'll really start with the sourcing experience, opportunity identification. So this is not search, it's really taking search and flipping it on its head, starting with the user writing out what is their investment thesis in a few sentences. And then Grata's agent interprets that, understands it, and identifies companies, buyers, conferences, live deals, and even bankers that align with that thesis and align with the firm's historical investment behavior. So it's a new way to discover opportunities through a natural conversational experience. And building off of that, we're looking at building in recommendations. So think of this as a proactive intelligence layer that builds off of the investment thesis that you've described to the agent. Based on your specific criteria, Grata is now proactively bringing you opportunities when a new company appears that matches that criteria, or advisors that have shifted into an industry that you care about, deal activity that matches your mandate, you get a real time notification about the things you are interested and should be staying on top of. Um, the next thing I want to talk about is deal screening. And I would say this is one of the most time consuming parts of a deal maker's workflow. Imagine being able to upload a sim and instantly getting an analysis of how the deal stacks up to historical deals you've done, helps you understand how fragmented the sector is, how the valuation compares to historical comps, what the risks are. All of it's powered by Grata's agent, but grounded in Grata's proprietary data as well as your firm's data. And again, that's you being able to rely on only your firm's data to be able to power this. And so as we talk about market data, the last is around sector research. So this is where Grata's agent acts like a research analyst at scale. It can pull insights from a variety of content and sources. Think of earnings transcript, news, industry reports, documents your team has uploaded, to help give you a comprehensive view of the market. And again, it embeds your firm's intelligence into that output, ensuring it's customized, it's specific to your firm, and enables you to benchmark current deals against past ones, enabling institutional knowledge to be available to your firm fairly instantaneously. In short, there's a lot of applications of Gen AI. I'm really excited about it, and I'm really excited about how Gen AI can really take the data Grata has, combine it with the intelligence your firm has, and help your firm make more actionable, more better decisions um, with more clarity.
Very exciting, very helpful, Pallavi. I know there are a bunch of people in the audience who are thinking about building some Gen AI tools in-house themselves. So, having actually built these for several years with your teams, can you share a little bit more about how firms should think about what they need to do to actually build it themselves from a technology standpoint, process standpoint, people standpoint, all the elements to actually get this done?
Sure. So I believe the first thing is you have to begin simply and intentionally. You have to really clearly know what you want AI to do for you. Understand your use cases. For example, are you looking for it to repeat or to build and automate repetitive time-consuming tasks? Are you looking for it to summarize documents? But be very, very clear about what you want it to be used for, And that will help you have a clarity and set up the stage for your success. The second is, what data are you ultimately trying to, or what data will you be using to make these use cases successful? It's a notion called the golden corpus. Identify the high quality trusted data that forms the backbone of your workflows, because the quality of your outcomes will be directly related to how good your data is. And therefore, it's important to make sure you have a very clear sense about what you have at your disposal, whether it needs to be conditioned, and also ultimately how it's ultimately going to translate into the outcomes that you're trying to produce. Next, choose the AI models that you need for your specific needs. For general purposes like summarizing a document, a lot of the commercially available AI tools like ChatGPT or DeepSeek, um, which is an open source version, those are going to be your best bet. They're well trained, they have a ton of usage data, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel. So using something like that to solve very, very mundane use cases is going to provide you with the highest ROI and is going to get you the results most quickly. But in cases where you have a more specialized use case, you want to partner with a vendor who has access to the right proprietary data. Remember, a finance AI trained specifically on robust proprietary financial data is going to be a lot better than a model that's trained on Reddit. So make sure you know not only where or what the use case for that model is, but also where is that model getting its data from. And finally, the most important step, I believe, is you really want to establish a culture of AI enablement. You want AI to be normalized as part of your day-to-day workflow and represent a significant paradigm shift in how your team is operating. And you want to make sure that those who embrace AI are seeing it as a key to their own personal success. You want to hire people who have the domain expertise that you need to make these AI models effective. You also want people with the right mindset. You want people with good critical thinking skills, strong ethical judgment, and an eagerness to use these tools rather than resist and feel like it's somehow encroaching upon their particular skill set. Having that and that cultural sort of thread go throughout your workflows will make sure that whatever AI workflow you establish will always produce the outcomes you need at the highest return on investment. But ultimately, with any of these things, thinking about AI thoughtfully and strategically is more about the technology. It's about really making sure that your team sees this as something that's making their life better and faster and more confident in what they do, and ultimately seeing it as almost an essential tool, much like the way back in the day word processors became the replacement for typewriters. It is now simply a part of everyone's life, and the more readily it becomes accepted as a tool in their chain, the more effective and the better outcomes you'll have by introducing AI into your corporate workflows.
Thanks, Sung. Very helpful. Before we move to the live Q&A, I just want to recap everything we talked about in a diagram. And if I were to put it on a page, it would look like this 2x2. And the market has really started with generalist solutions. What really got popular was ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Perplexity, that's using a lot of external data, but is built as a generalist. Then what happened is firms started to say, this is really powerful. How can I apply this on my internal data? Microsoft implemented Copilot. Google implemented Gemini. Now what we're seeing is this moving upstream and moving to purpose-built solutions. So each industry is seeing application layers being built on top of the generalists, being fine-tuned, being used with the data in that industry. We see this happening in the M&A and investment and private market world. You see it happening in parallels across in sales and procurement and customer service. And firms are really looking at more purpose-built solutions to sit on top of their internal data, as well as AI-based systems to feed them with really good market or external data. Grata plays in this right side, this top right side of the quadrant. There are other players coming up and up-and-comers in the top left, but that's really where we're seeing the world move as the AI adopts and as the application layer gets built on top of the AI. Again, we spent a lot of time today talking about the data and talking about how people are using tools in their stack. We're happy to answer questions about this. And of course, Pallavi, Song, and I can always be reached over email. But I do want to turn this to the audience Q&A just to wrap up here. I think officially on time, we've got 3 minutes, but the three of us can stay on for another 15 or so to answer any additional questions. And actually, Pallavi, Song, there are a handful of questions that have already come in throughout the session. So why don't I start going through these and I'll toss them up, and if either of you feels more comfortable answering, you can go ahead and answer. So one question from an audience member was, can you give me some examples of what types of user data are most helpful in helping the LLM make the best decisions?
I can take that one. It's based. I think it's what I said before. It really depends on your use case. For example, if you're looking to solve a question about software engineering, you're going to want an LLM that's been trained on engineering code, maybe sources like Stack Exchange and other places where code discussions are happening. And purpose-built AIs that know its data set and know its intended use cases are going to be a lot more effective. So, in essence, it really is no different from a human, and that's why they call it neural networks. The whole purpose of building LLMs is to replicate how humans process problem solving. If you have a problem set and it's tied to a specific domain, you want to make sure that the data that it's sourcing from is representative of that particular domain. And so, going back to my last comment, you want to make sure that when you're building any solution that involves an AI process, that it is ingesting that specific data set for that particular domain in order for you to produce the right outcomes for that particular workflow.
So another question, and this one is probably for Pallavi. So with the AI features that are being added or are coming up in Grata, will Grata be able to handle queries like manufacturing companies in the Denver metro area likely valued between 5 and 7 million? I'm trying to get a feel for how flexible the search layer will actually be.
It's a good question. So the crux of it is first understanding, does Grata have the data to be able to answer this question? And the answer is yes. We do have companies across the US, across different industries, across different areas, geographies like Denver, with the size and the revenue of said business. And today you can go into Grata, you can input those facets to be able to get a response from our search experience, providing you the set of companies, manufacturing companies in Denver, from 5 to 7 million in size. Now, given that our UI and our experience today can answer this question, um, AI features that we layer on top of it will also be able to answer that exact question because it's leaning on our core data set, our core data store, which had the full set of companies across industries, um, structured with facets like the industry that they're in, the location that they're in, the revenue, their end customer, so on and so forth. And Corey, if you're interested to get a feel of how flexible our search layer really is, I'd invite you to speak to someone on the team, get a demo, run complex questions through, and see if you're able to get the insights that you're looking for.
And Paulie, this is a follow-up but related question from another attendee. It's just expanding more on that text-based query that Grata's building, going beyond Grata's current systems today. Will you be able to write a few sentences in the future to generate a search? Is this on Grata's roadmap?
Exactly. That is around the concept of opportunity identification. And yes, you can be able to describe what you're looking for in a few sentences and that helps you define the thesis that you're interested in, that then responds back with a series of companies or bankers or deals that really match that thesis. And so yes, this is something we are evaluating as we build into our product.
Another question from the audience. I appreciate that Grata has built its own AI capability for translating natural language into structured data queries. However, adding separate AI interfaces for each of our tools, for example, Grata, Snowflake, increases complexity instead of consolidating the user experience. We prefer a single centralized employee-facing AI interface, such as ChatGPT, capable of querying and aggregating knowledge from multiple platforms. Given this, is it feasible to integrate or expose Grata's underlying knowledge base and query capabilities directly into ChatGPT or our AI tools? If so, could you outline the technical feasibility and considerations involved?
I'll take this one. Oh, Pallavi, you want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's definitely something we could consider. We have an API, and we've talked about potentially building something known as a Model Context Protocol or MCP around our API to make it available to any AI agent as a tool for querying. It is something that we are considering, and we just need to make sure that we are able to do so without compromising our particular proprietary interests, as well as making sure that it's in the best interest of our end users as well.
And to add to that, we have firms today that are using Grata's API to funnel into their own singular knowledge store, where they are then implementing LLM layers to query to query and get responses, not just on Grata's data, but also other data sets that they have internally. So this certainly is a possibility. And if you're interested to learn more, I would suggest chatting with someone on our team about our API and Snowflake data feeds.
Yeah, the data warehouse is a big one, as well as the different endpoints, the search endpoint in Grata that you actually run a search through, as well as the enrichment endpoint that can bring you back structured data on a company. But another question from the audience here is, and this is more general, but how are firms using Grata to win more deals and source differentiated deal flow? Do you see AI enhancing that process moving forward?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about this. So firms today are using Grata in a number of ways. I talked a little bit about our exclusive data, particularly with the network that we've built out. So that's a very, let's say, real time, in more instantaneous method of winning deals, and building differentiated deal flow. So if you're not familiar, we have an experience called live deals, where it's a running feed of deals that advisors within our community are actively sharing with buy side firms. And once you have access to that experience, you can check every day to see what are the new deals that are being shared. How does that match your investment thesis? And eventually looking to build more recommendations into that. And that really plays a role in how we see AI enhancing that process, because once you define your investment thesis, within, Grata's AI agent can then go out and find those active deals that are being run that match your investment thesis and provide it to you in real time notifications.
Excellent. So there's one more from the audience. This one is about, how does Grata's AI compete with the other M&A data and intelligence providers out there in terms of proprietary data and subject matter expertise?
So I can take this one as well. Our our interest has always been to provide data and insights to deal makers that are reliable, accurate, and trusted. And so that's the same philosophy that we take with our AI, whether it's our AI powered search experience or our AI analyst. It's grounded in the data and context we have on private businesses. And so I mentioned this a couple of times, but we fully understand that in order to make M&A decisions, you can't rely on hallucinations or fabricated content. So our AI looks at data we have from a company's website, from LinkedIn, from press releases, from government filings, reviews, and a series of other data sources to provide a holistic view on the company, but also to be able to provide more contextual answers to questions like where does it sit in the value chain? What advantage does it have over its competitors? And so that's where our AI experience really shines because it's sitting on Grata's data and able to answer questions a lot deeper than the slimmer layer of data that might be available
Mm.
in other platforms for the private markets.
And just to add on to that, while yes, we have access to proprietary data, we also have a fleet of subject matter experts who are analyzing results and who are training the model and our models in addition to just the raw data. They're adding their perspectives and their insights and saying that doesn't look right. I'm going to flag this as something that needs to be reevaluated and making our AI models more effective by identifying exceptions or introducing new sort of rule sets that can only be derived once you've actually had access to the data. And that in conjunction with the proprietary data gives us a unique advantage over our competitors because of the amount of additional user generated input that we're adding to the context of every AI decision.
Excellent. Well, there's just one last question, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave you all on a cliffhanger here. The question was, Pallavi mentioned DataSite and Grata, and what is the nature of the relationship between Grata and DataSite? Well, next week we will be announcing more about that relationship and that partnership, which we are really excited about, as being able to fuel the proprietary data in Grata as well as information that deal makers can access when they're reviewing a deal in a VDR. And combining those is going to be a really powerful use case for deal makers, but more to come on that next week and beyond. So we'll have to leave you on that cliffhanger. But otherwise, we thank you all for attending today and spending an hour with us. We love talking about this and giving our technical leaders a chance to go under the hood, but appreciate your time, and we hope to see you all next time.